Welcome to another episode of Bitcash Breakthrough, your gateway to digital wealth. Please welcome Django Unchained, an influential figure in the blockchain ecosystem and the host of FM, a leading radio station dedicated to Cosmos app chains. As a validator, investor, and advisor within the Cosmos community, Django has played a pivotal role in advancing decentralized technologies. Notably, she was a principal architect at Cosmos Network, where she significantly contributed to increasing the project's market cap from zero to over 1 billion in just 3 years. Before her groundbreaking work at Cosmos, Chjango honed her skills at NASA's JPL in Pasadena, California. Welcome.
Thank you, June. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I always want to start from the beginning. How did you get into crypto? When did you hear
Yeah.
a coin first?
Yeah, really funny story. I went to college with a friend. He's one of the very smart guys. And I went to work at JPL and found that the corporate slash government sector really wasn't for me. I was the youngest person in the office and it's office work. So it's very regimented, 9 to 5, the typical thing. And as you can imagine, it was a struggle, even though I was working for NASA on the brand side of things. It's like very shiny, but the problem was that if you're working with boomers all day and night, it's soul crushing because you're completely speaking different languages. And what happened was I was looking for a way out and I was trying to look into what I would do next. So it just happened that I was going to party with my college friend, and the party, we were listening to Infected Mushrooms, and he was talking to me about how Bitcoin's proof of work and UTXO system was going to change the nature of finance as we knew it. I was like, okay, I'm interested. Let me learn more. And so that whole night, he taught me about Bitcoin. And that same day, I said, okay, I'm going to go create a Coinbase account and buy Bitcoins and just see what can happen from there. And then a few months after that, I decided, okay, I'm just going to dive right in. I don't know where I'm going or how I'm going to contribute to the Bitcoin ecosystem, but I just am. And I'm going to quit my job at JPL. So I did that. And then I flew to Bali because at the time, there was something called the Bit Islands Project. And Bit Islands was this initiative to turn all of the merchants in Bali to accept Bitcoin, such that once you landed in Bali, all you had to do was have a mobile phone and hold Bitcoins in it, and you would be able to survive off of that without converting your dollars into the Indonesian rupiah. That was the initiative. And we built a lovely little early Bitcoin community there where we hosted meetups at Ubud, the co-working space of Ubud, Hub Ubud. And there was a bunch of people who came in. They would fly into Bali, dip in, go to our meetups, and then dip out, right? It was like a landing spot between the West and the East. So that was where the original Ethereum core developers like Victor Tron showed up and gave us a little working demo of Solidity that didn't work at that time, of course. Never works in prod when you're trying to demo it live. And Virgil Griffith also came through, and that's how I met him. And so a lot of the really people who have been longstanding community luminaries that's how I met a lot of the longstanding luminaries at the time. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Wow,
I
no,
was
that's
thinking about
great. Yeah, that's fantastic to take it. So this is early too. When I went to Bali, it was many years. It was just a few years ago. And so I think I heard of Ubud and I didn't realize the history behind it. So what year was this when this all happened? Was
Yeah,
it
it was 2015, January of
2015?
2015. I left JPL,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
then same month I flew to Bali, and we started building up the community there and convincing a lot of the merchants to accept Bitcoin. And so I was there for about a year in Bali before I took off to go do like a digital nomad trip around the world, mostly Eastern Europe and Turkey and Greece. And then eventually and this is funny story, and I think this is cosmic happenstance, which is I got audited that same year. And so the IRS was telling me, okay, your trip is over, you're done, come home. So I had to come home. And once I came home, that was 2016, and I eventually ended up in San Francisco. So in San Francisco, I was like, it was like, it's the same story where because I had been jobless, and to my parents, to like traditional Asian parents, it looks like you're just burning cash and you're not, what are you doing with your life? You're not gainfully employed. You're like, what are you doing? I had to come home, get the audit thing sorted, and then go to San Francisco and like actually look for opportunities to be gainfully employed in the way that was satisfactory to the old Asian parents. And so went to SF, and in January 2017, that was when I went to my first official industry conference that wasn't like an offshoot in Bali or whatever. I went to Consensus Construct. I met Emin Gunsir there. I met Joseph Poon there. First guys, Christopher Jeffrey, Blockstream guys, everyone, Lightning Network, Lightning Labs people, basically everyone who was building anything in crypto at that time. Joseph Lubin was there as well. It was just full of everyone whose names you would recognize. And then eventually at that point, I met up with Jay Kwan, and that was when I was like, oh, this makes sense to me. I never really drank the Ethereum Kool-Aid. But then after I met Jay Kwan, I was like, actually, this multi-chain vision really makes sense to me. And this was 2017, before when everyone thought that everything was going to be built on top of Ethereum. I was like, nah, I don't think so. And then, joined up with Jay Kwan, and we started building Cosmos together. I was basically doing everything that wasn't product related, that wasn't developing the actual product, but building up the community, writing communication to help people understand like why proof of stake is the next paradigm, why we're moving into a multi-chain world, why nothing is going to be able to scale if it's on one single monolithic layer like Ethereum and all that. And I think directionally, Jay's vision was obviously correct in retrospect in a lot of ways. And so, here we are. Long story short.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, it's great to hear the insight. Hey, I think I met you at the House of Shields in 2016 when you were.
Oh, yeah.
It was funny. And but you were also a writer as well. I remember there was a publication that you wrote for, and I also remember that because that came up in conversation.
Yeah, I was writing for multiple outlets as like a freelance journalist, because back then, if you weren't a systems engineer, like a Bitcoin core developer, there weren't really that many opportunities for you, right? So what was I going to do, not being a programmer? So I was like, okay, I'm going to write about this stuff. I'm going to interview people who are building things in the space right now, such as Christopher Jeffrey. I interviewed him about Bitcoin. I was interviewing the Decred guys at that time. I was interviewing, EOS, wrote about EOS as well. Yeah, I was trying to carve a path out for someone who is a non-programmer like myself. And that started through journalism.
But you had the technical abilities to at least understand the concepts and whatnot. If you're talking about UTXO and proof of work, your friend telling you about that, and that kind of being one of the reasons, or at least why you believed in Bitcoin, I think that's pretty impressive to have that kind of awareness. And so let's go back. Okay, was Bitcoin? Did you just get it immediately? Your friend talked to you about it, and it seemed
that same night.
And then you were all in,
immediately.
and then you went to travel.
Something to take note of before, like why Bitcoin stuck with me that same day and why it stood out, is because before that, for a good 5 years before I discovered Bitcoin, I was very interested in the root causes of the 2008 global financial crisis and looking deeply into it. So I was rabbit holing into what exactly caused that to happen and why it ruined so many millions of lives, because I have a very like French revolutionary kind of mindset ingrained in me somehow, which is always looking at how did the proletariats and the bourgeois kind of fight, and in this modern day, it's like the elites, the political powers versus the normal, average, everyday people. I've always had that ingrained in me, so I was very interested in understanding what exactly caused that to happen, that just decimated the lives of so many millions of Americans. And the answer was, I knew that it was the Federal Reserve and the fuckery around the monetary machinery that affects the entire world. And so I was already convinced that in the near future, there was going to be some kind of global currency crisis. And so and again, this is, I think, cosmic happenstance. The universe is like, it leads you in certain directions if you are sensitive enough to hear it, right? From brings up Bitcoin. And I'm like, oh, this is the answer. You go into this rabbit hole and get all depressed because you're like listing all these problems, like problem after problem, but you don't know any solutions. And then boom, one day, like the solution just, comes to you while you're on drugs at a party. And then you're like, aha, this is it.
Yeah, that's a great story. And yeah, now you're here right now. How did you evolve from Bitcoin then and then you said you weren't quite a believer in Ethereum, at least to a full extent, but then you gravitated towards this new Cosmos system.
Yeah,
And yeah, go ahead.
Here's a meta for you, which could possibly explain why people with brains like me versus someone with my archetype of brain and thinking and mental framework is never going to drink the Ethereum Kool-Aid. And likewise, someone who drinks the Ethereum Kool-Aid is never going to drink the Bitcoin and Cosmos Kool-Aid. And the reason for that is because I like to bring up Kevin Zo's matrix of like grift versus utopia. Have you ever read that, his State of Crypto blog post?
Mm.
So he creates a matrix, and horizontal axis, it's like something is more utopian the more right that you go, and the more upward the vertical quadrant, it's the more grifty it is. And the least grifty, least utopian application is a centralized exchange, versus the most grifty, like most utopian, is something like EO or Solana in 2021. And as time progresses, something like Solana could get less grifty but remain still utopian as the technology either like matches up to the promises that were made or not. And so there's two types of people. One brain works, and I'm alluding to Thomas Sowell. One brain subscribes to an unconstrained vision, meaning you think that technology, for example, is unconstrained. So you subscribe to high utopian outcomes because you're very optimistic and tend to be bounded by the constraints of pragmatic or like realistic constraints, versus constrained vision people who tend to be early Bitcoiners who are like, okay, I understand the nature of human nature. So human nature is a constraint. And because of the constraints of human nature, for example, I know that humans are selfish, inherently selfish. So we need systems that work with that inherent selfishness rather than believe that humans can break out of our natures and be completely altruistic. And so you subscribe to like a more utopian vision. And so Ethereans tend to be unconstrained, anything is possible optimists who tend to think utopian outcomes are possible, versus constrained people like Bitcoiners, Thomas Sowell, like people who tend to believe in more, I guess, conservative visions, so to speak, who believe that Bitcoin, sound money, that sort of thing needs to happen for this X, Y, or Z reasons. And that's why, similar to people who are in Cosmos, are much more aligned with the Bitcoin thesis than it is with Ethereum thesis, for that very reason. So that's the meta.
That's a fascinating perspective. I haven't heard before, but I'll look into it. And so you found your natural archetype of like being, let's say, closer to Bitcoin. And Cosmos is a kind of a different ecosystem altogether, because the Bitcoiners would be maximalists, right? So they wouldn't even believe in anything aside from proof of work, right? But I guess at least in some level, it is closer, I think, philosophically to Bitcoin. Maybe the kind of the collateralized proof of stake kind of idea is probably more academically tested to be an alternative, like proof of stake type system. But then Ethereum is also similar now in structure, right? Like they have stake and they have validators. And so it seems as though there's, at least technologically, some more similarities than differences now. So yeah, what was it like being in the early stages is Cosmos? Okay, so you found your kind of tribe here. It's early on. You're kind of closely working with Jake Wan. What was that like? It was just probably a small group of people. Yeah. And
I think Cosmos, I don't have much experience working in such close proximity with any other teams, right? So I could only speak to the Tendermint experience, but I infer based on hearing other people's experiences that the Tendermint experience is probably very unique just because of the composition of the early team dynamic early on. Because Jay Kwan is he's an outlier figure. It's not Working with him is not, there's no amount of, it's just different. He's similar to Kanye personality wise. So imagine trying to work on a project with Kanye. It's weak. It's not gonna
Yeah.
be your typical like working in a team on a startup kind of story. Yeah. Yeah.
Great analogy. So yeah, and because I think at least from the outside, there were a lot of kind of drama and things that happened. People have read about, I think, and I don't know the details, but you had the inner insights on all of that was going on. But we probably don't need to go into too much detail. But it was the interesting experience doing a lot of the architecture and just helping out with the ecosystem building. For those that are just builders in general, like what kind of advice would you give to people? What kind of insights did you learn through your experience with building a kind of a top 20 layer one project? Is there any good takeaways from anything,
Yeah.
technologically or politically, whatever?
Yeah. All right. This is something that I said before in another podcast several years ago, but that podcast
Mm,
was like specifically tailored towards women. But
mm,
then it was the advice was, and I think still is relevant, that you should build towards scaling up yourself and eventually making yourself obsolete, because that's the ultimate goal of building a decentralized ecosystem, right? It's not, unless you want to go down the monolithic path and be a benevolent dictator for life. Solana Foundation, Ethereum Foundation, with like Vitalik being de facto leader who makes unilateral changes for the protocol, and just every single application that depends on the Ethereum base layer is like at just their destinies are at the whims of Vitalik wanting to change something. But I think that for a decentralized ecosystem, if your goal is truly to be decentralized and build an ecosystem that's going to outlast yourself, then you should scale up your own capabilities such that a torch could be passed from generation to generation. So that was the goal with Cosmos. And we initially hired different people to do that, but eventually built foundations to abstract those responsibilities away to the community. And now we have a community pool that funds DAOs and other little offshoots that has various different responsibilities. And so the ecosystem is very much like it's independent now. It has its own footing. Yeah. So that's where we're at now.
I think that's fantastic to get there, but there's always this discussion of centralization versus decentralization, and maybe how early you can get there, and maybe a progressive path towards that. What was your experience? I assume it wasn't just like this and decentralized, but what are the kind of the learnings to get there sooner? Because you guys seem to have at least put the infrastructure in place where you're more decentralized earlier than other ecosystems.
Yeah, so it was like one aspect of it was that wasn't our choice because our team blew up. The other aspect was like there
Yeah.
was another aspect that was intentional about it. And I like in retrospect, I don't necessarily, so one way to do it is you have either a foundation, which a lot of projects do have, or you have on-chain community pool. But then so there's always the problem of who should manage the treasury, and how do you manage the treasury, and are you any good, and are you not corrupt? And what tends to happen with a lot of these treasuries almost all of the time is corruption seeps in, right? Anyone who holds the keys to the coffers ultimately end up self-dealing, and it's actually the exception, not the rule, that they do that. They don't do that. Ethereum Foundation was very fortunate to not fall into that trap, but I would say almost all other ecosystems, Cosmos and Polkadot more obviously has fallen into that trap. But in general, assuming you have good people doing things that are for the benefit of the ecosystem and not just trying to plunder the treasury, then they're able to do a lot of damage by allocating the funds in a productive manner. So there's
Yeah,
trade-offs.
that's definitely. So is there is there anything you can do to that? Maybe put the Bitcoin hat on and say, hey, it's self-interest and greed is going to take over. But there could be systems you put in, safeguards you could put in place. Or is there anything that you've seen could be effective or is effective to prevent self-dealing?
I mean, look, if I had the answer to that, if I had that problem,
Yeah.
we wouldn't have problems today, right? Look, I mean, the game theory in all like on-chain governance as well as like meat space states governance with like national governments or federal governments rather, all leans towards corruption. It all like the gravity of corruption is so strong that it's almost the default mode, right? I don't think we've as a space or as individuals have really figured out good mechanisms to solve that.
You got to go back to proof of work,
I mean,
not have
yeah.
any kind of governance.
Yeah, or
uh,
just not have a treasury that's managed by basically officials that appointed themselves. It's gotta, there's got to be some kind of checks and balances involved. What I was trying to push for recently for the Cosmos Foundation, the Interchain Foundation, because this is like the elephant in the room. People know about it, people talk about it, and yet it's hard to really get any change implemented, which is we're in the plunder the treasury phase right now, and the people who are running it are basically self-dealing. And so I was proposing that the Cosmos Hub governance, the people who stake to the Cosmos Hub, could vote for delegates to basically be on the board. So now there's this outside checks and balances. But the problem with that is like, in order for that to be changed, the people who actually do have legal voting power at the ICF didn't want that in, obviously. So it's hard. So it's hard to change that legally without their own opt-in. But until it becomes completely politically unpopular for the people with the voting power at the ICF to vote against that, then it's not going to change. That's the state of Cosmos governance right now.
Yeah, and like you say, I think that's a common problem amongst all ecosystems, where probably a small group of people, larger stakeholders, are call the shots. And yeah, and it's not purely the stake-based system, because they're just so much more influential. They just have a lot more stake, and it's hard to get everyone to collectively maybe go against these more centralized group of stakeholders. But yeah, it's a tough problem. Yeah, but
And
I think
political one,
yeah,
it's not a
yeah,
technology one, right? It's a completely
yeah.
social problem.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. I think, yeah, these are definitely open questions, and I think definitely need better solutions and better safeguards and structures and governance structures as well. So I think, yeah, I hope to build better systems for governance in the future. So, and it's funny you mentioned, because Polkadot is also like, they focus on governance, right? That's one of the key pillars of
Yeah.
their
And
spec.
Polkadot is one of the most corrupt
Yeah.
chains out there. It's
Oh, okay.
even the situation is even worse in Polkadot. So
Okay.
the situation in Polkadot is there is one whale who holds more than 33% of the dot. And
Oh, wow.
I'm not sure what their quorum threshold is, but imagine if it's like even 45 to 50%, like this one voter gets to sway the vote in any way that he wants. And so now the game is because the entire Polkadot on-chain treasury is just they're also in the plunder the treasury phase. So anyone who submits an on-chain vote is really promising to develop something for the ecosystem, but really just taking the money from the treasury. And so the way that they get it through is they bribe this whale to get him to vote in their favor. And then that's how they get so let's say it takes me $100,000 to go bribe this whale. And then my treasury proposal is $500,000. So I get 400,000 back. I deliver nothing to the Polkadot ecosystem, but I've made $400,000 just from getting this proposal passed. Pretty good deal, right? That's what's
Yeah.
happening in Polkadot. It's fucked.
Wow, yeah. So I definitely think, yeah, there needs to be better solutions, especially if you're a proof of stake system. The one thing I understand, it's similar to a corporate structure where you have executives really also self-dealing. That's always a potential problem, and the minority shareholders are the ones that are like, they lose out, because it's like, yeah, the company is supposed to be providing a service, good service and they're supposed to be making money. But if you're self-dealing, you're not like working on the business. You're not trying to create a better business. You're just trying to enrich your friends and family. And so that's always been an issue, especially with the just minority shareholder rights in general. And so I could imagine, yeah, this is similar. I think we got to go back to what has happened in the past to figure out solutions as well, because I think there must be a lot of case studies out there. Okay, so this is a big problem, and it's good that there's an open. I think this needs to be a priority for decentralized ecosystems to solve, for sure. So let's go to the present day. After Cosmos, like, where you still keep in touch. I know you're involved with kind of osmosis and other related chains around Cosmos. But what do you think of the ecosystem there? I also want you to maybe describe, because we had this conversation just earlier. I hope you can have this on. We can have this on video. So the comparison between Celestia and Eigenlayer and how you describe that, it'd be great for you to explain that again. How's the Cosmos ecosystem first off in general?
Yeah, the strength, both the greatest strength and greatest weakness of the Cosmos ecosystem is that it is decentralized, or rather distributed, despite not really having a core anymore. So visually, the analogy would be that the known universe keeps expanding like in every which way, right? It's not going this way or that, it's going every which way. And so no matter how you perceive the Cosmos ecosystem, whether you're bullish or bearish because of this, that, or the other, it's still expanding and growing nonetheless, because people are still like, the merits of the tech stack are still there. And so people are still choosing to use the Cosmos SDK to build their applications. Excuse me. And a lot of them are saying, maybe I want to be abstracted away from the Cosmos brand, but nevertheless, I'm still using the technology and I want to build my own brand on top of it. So either way, it's still this like ever expanding thing. And the strength of the ecosystem is that it's like right? The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So even though some parts are breaking down, there's other aspects of it that are still growing and evolving. So it's very much this dynamic, growing thing, growing, living thing. Because no matter what, even now, I still have a lot of different people building things in the Cosmos ecosystem, even though they may not necessarily brand it as Cosmos. Okay, getting to the Celestia and the Eigenlayer explanation, and how the ecosystem of like modular chains evolved, is that Celestia looked at Ethereum. Think of the state of Ethereum in 2018. Ethereum in 2018 is one monolithic chain. And if you look at that and extrapolate 5 years into the future, you already know that it's not going to be scalable, right? Because in 2017, the CryptoKitties application nearly choked up the entire chain, and already people weren't able to use it as it was prescribed. So Celestia looked at Ethereum and said, okay, how could we build a better, more scalable chain such that you could decouple the execution environment, where most of the load and the overhead is, from just the most basic thing that a base blockchain needs to do, which is data availability? So they looked at that and said, okay, we're going to create this, or we're going to reimagine what the EVM could look like in that regard, and say that every single application, such as CryptoKitties or whatever, would live as its own rollup. And then for these rollups to just basically DA back into this base chain that we're going to call Celestia DA. Celestia builds that and launches it in 2021. And Eigenlayer looks at this and goes, okay, but what if we use an existing gas token? What if we use Ethereum as the base layer and ETH as the gas token, but still create this DA and roll-up modular stack dynamic? And so that's what they use to create Eigenlayer. So with Eigenlayer is just a smart contract on the Ethereum base chain, and it's AVS chains. Like in Eigenlayer speak, an AVS is just like another word for a rollup that executes off chain, off the Ethereum main chain, that then basically DAs back into the Eigenlayer stack. But the thing is, we want to inherit the network effects of Ethereum instead of building a completely new base chain without all of the network effects and all of the amenities that Ethereum has. So that's why they thought, we're going to use Ethereum as the base layer. We're going to use Ethereum as the gas token for all of these different AVS modules. And yeah, that's Eigenlayer's thesis. If you extrapolate that thesis to its end state, which is what Sunny Agrawal did, Sunny Agrawal, the co-founder of Osmosis, did. So then he envisioned something called mesh security, which is, why stop at using one chain as a base layer and one staking token like Ethereum as the gas token, but why not basically create a mesh network of all of these different blockchains and compose all their different respective tokens together and basically multiply the added effects of each of their market caps of each token, of each native token of each of these chains, and secure each other, right? So if you so what if every chain could possibly be a DA chain, and we could like cross pollinate our staking tokens to create a more robust proof of staking ecosystem. And so bringing it back down to just two chains, so you could like reason about it easier. If you have the Osmosis chain and the Akash chain, if you created a bilateral agreement between the two of them and like cross pollinated the staking tokens of each of them, so Osmosis would take 20% of the Akash market cap that, you know, restakes back onto Osmosis and vice versa, then you could create a proof of stake dynamic whereby each of the security budget on each chain is greater than the security budget that would have resided on its own chain if it were only Osmo tokens. So now I could have Osmo and the Akash market cap securing the Osmo chain, and I could have Akash and Osmo securing the Akash chain. And if you extrapolate that to many different chains that are all connected, let's say via IBC, then you could create this like mesh network of mesh secured blockchains, proof of stake blockchains. So that's like the end state of what Eigenlayer and Celestia could be.
Yeah, that's great. Not only what they do now, but potentially in the future as well. I think even Bitcoin, there's a project called Babylon, I think, and they are creating a system where you can stake and get yield, and they can probably participate in this bilateral mesh network system as well if they aren't already planning to do something like that. But it's interesting, not even only proof of stake, but potentially even proof of work systems can share security.
What's interesting with using Bitcoin as staking collateral is that, so like Babylon is a Cosmos SDK chain. They're in the Cosmos ecosystem, and Babylon is like the eigenlayer of Bitcoin, but its AVS chains, its AVS modules are the Cosmos app chains. That's interesting, right? Because now they're turning Bitcoin into the DA layer with Babylon as the middleware, like orchestration chain. And then the Bitcoiner staking through Babylon is earning yield of the Babylon AVS Cosmos app chains. What's interesting, what's nice about that is that Bitcoin, even though, because it's proof of work, even though like a bunch of Bitcoin is going to be like staked and percentable on all these different chains, but let's just say like just on Babylon, it does nothing to the security of Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is safe no matter what, even though, and imagine if Bitcoin gets slashed on Babylon, it just makes the people who hold Bitcoin who didn't stake it more rich because there's like now less Bitcoin in the system, right? But then likewise, Babylon or any chain that uses Bitcoin as the slashable staking collateral is going to be more secure because now they're inheriting Bitcoin liquidity, which is significantly bigger than the liquidity of any like native Cosmos chain. So now they're inheriting a much larger market cap and a much larger security budget just notionally through Bitcoin. And so it's just this like symbiotic sea anemone and like clownfish kind of deal, right? It's like it's a great deal for everyone.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thanks for the breakdown with all of these ecosystems that are coming up. I think it's great to see, and we'll see how this shapes up. These are the more kind of popular system architectures or what new kind of innovations in this space. So it'll be great to see how everything shapes up in the next coming years. So let's
I mean, to be fair, I do want to say that even though Eigenlayer is the pioneer of this new buzzword called restaking, the concept is not new because all they're doing is something like what Cosmos and Polkadot had been talking about for years, which is shared security, right? Ultimately, it's just shared security with a different packaging, different wrapper. It's just shared security because like the whole idea with Cosmos and Polkadot was that, okay, we're going to use this hub chain. So like Atom, and Atom is going to be used for shared security to secure all these different blockchains. that depend on atom security, right? To be able to bootstrap those chains with relative ease without the barrier of having to bootstrap your own new validator set. So it's the same thing, but wrapped in a new concept called restaking.
It's just all marketing. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah,
But no,
it's just repackaging
no,
of the
but
same ideas.
yeah, no, that's a great point though. I didn't really think of it that way, and so yeah, that makes sense. It's really just the shared security of that. So the other kind of thesis was that you can have, instead of requiring shared security, you would have sovereign chains, right? And that's also another concept that was associated with, let's say, Cosmos and other, maybe Avalanche and other chains that didn't really rely on shared security. It was more like you could have sovereign chains, but there would be maybe more of a flatter structure of everyone having their own security, but it was maybe just not as prioritized in kind of the sovereign chain thesis, right? How was Cosmos? Because I would assume that Cosmos was seen as more of a sovereign chain kind of ecosystem, not necessarily always a shared security ecosystem. I think POT was a shared security system because they had parachains. But yeah, what's your thoughts? What are your thoughts on that? And I think Avalanche is a more flatter structure. They don't really share security
Yeah,
in their
yeah. What you're describing with sovereign chains is what we call app chains in Cosmos, and Cosmos is the only ecosystem that has app chains, and so that harkens to the distributed nature of Cosmos, where because the thing is with Cosmos, the secondary priority was to find a use case and a need for Atom, right? And so that was where shared security came in, and that was like retroactively shoehorned into the protocol, and that's what we call replicated security today. It's different name, fancy name, but and so Cosmos started off as, hey, everyone could just build your own chains with the Cosmos SDK, and it could have nothing to do with the Atom or the Cosmos Hub. In fact, the Cosmos Hub starts off doing really nothing for any app chain. If you're like building a Kosh or like Iris Network or like Osmosis chain, does nothing. So now we have Cosmos in this ecosystem of all of these different sovereign app chains and no shared security. And Polkadot starts off with, okay, we need to prioritize dot and why dot is useful. So we're going to start from there and then work our way down to like sovereign chains. So we start with the Polkadot main chain is like the beacon chain in Ethereum land. And we're going to have these which are basically ABS modules, which are basically like secure chains in Cosmos that rely on this beacon chain to perform consensus and data availability and whatever. And yeah, shared security started off in Polkadot. And then with Cosmos, we worked our way backwards to turn the Atom Cosmos Hub to be the shared security hub for our replicated interchain secure chains. But all of this is the same exact concept with different names, right? And then an eigenlayer is using the Ethereum main chain as the beacon chain, and its AVS modules are just parachain or app chains. And yeah, and likewise Near and Avalanche has like the main chain, and then it has like its subnets, right? Same with Near, it has like the main chain that does all the orchestration, consensus, etc., and it has like the sort of offshoots, like in Near, I think they call it like the sharded chains or something like that, whatever. Same thing, the architecture resembles it's similar, right? It's just like different ways to skin the cat using different base layers and different tokens. And that's why the aha moment for Sunny with mesh security is that, wait, all of this is arbitrary anyway. So why can't we plug and play different base layers? Who says one is better than the other? Plug and play the different tokens and just mix and match. Like, why does it matter anyway? And so you could create this like mesh network of all these different chains that are opting into, you could like, why do I have to pick the Cosmos Hub to be the shared security layer? Or why do I have to pick the Polkadot main chain or the Ethereum main chain? What if I want the Bitcoin one? What if I want Bitcoin and Osmosis? What if I want only Ethereum or like only Avalanche or Avalanche and Solana? It's arbitrary. So there's no reason why you would constrain it to any set of preferred chain. So that's the innovation. That's like the revelation with why the end state of all of this is just mesh security. And mesh security ultimately it just looks like the internet, right? And what is the internet of Web3? The internet of blockchains. What is that? It's ultimately Cosmos. The end state of all of this is the Cosmos vision.
Yeah, that's the great way to put it. And because you guys were also working on interoperability, which fits this end state that you're talking about, because you would need interoperability between all the different chains to make this all work. So how that was a kind of one of the big ideas that you guys promoted early on, and so there is interoperability between app chains. How good is that right now? And then maybe beyond the app chains, like outside of the app chains, like where does interoperability right now? And maybe if you want to give some
Yeah. So
history.
yeah, so with at this point, so let's say when Cosmos started, Cosmos was one of the only projects where we were the pioneer of blockchain interoperability. So what we cared about was this end state, right? Because think about what the mental state of everyone in the ecosystem was in 2017, which is like, why do you even care about blockchain interoperability? Everything in Ethereum is already interoperable. My smart contract is interoperable with the other smart contract. So what do you mean? Like, why would I care about being interoperable with a different chain outside of Ethereum? So that's why so Cosmos pioneered blockchain interoperability. And now we're at a state where everyone's, of course, we need blockchain interoperability. But the thing is, when Cosmos started, we built a generalized message passing protocol called inter-blockchain communication with that in mind, with the notion and expectation that the entire crypto ecosystem would be able to use it, adopt it for blockchain to blockchain communication. And so IBC works supremely well in the Cosmos ecosystem because it was built for that. But the problem with the EVM ecosystem is that EVM existed before IBC. And so it's EVM ecosystem to be compatible with the Tendermint ecosystem. There's a lot of technical nuances, a lot of it residing in the differences between light clients and having to validate all the Tendermint signatures on the Ethereum blockchain, which would be like extremely cost prohibitive in the EVM. So all that really prevented IBC adoption in the EVM ecosystem because unfortunately IBC wasn't really, and Tendermint stack wasn't really built with the EVM in mind. So now so basically we have these two worlds now, the EVM world and the Cosmos IBC world. And the EVM world largely is unable to efficiently and cost effectively adopt IBC. Let's just say that. And that's why the EVM ecosystem largely relies on either multi-sigs for interoperability, a completely trusted way, or bridges. So the EVM ecosystem kind of has this clunky, really trusted, not ideal way of doing blockchain to blockchain interoperability. But eventually, I think that with given a time as a space, we're going to figure out how to do a standard way of blockchain to blockchain communication, and that's how we're going to progress. But right now, it's two separate universes.
Gotcha. No, thanks for the update. Yeah, I was curious about that because the EVM kind of system seems to be the de facto so far, like in terms of everyone's doing an EVM if you're basically right. So it's unfortunate that there's not this compatibility and you have to rely on bridges or MSIGs. Is this also true with, let's say, Axelar was something more recent? Are they using bridges and MSIGs instead of more?
Yeah, so Axelar is a Cosmos SDK chain, and it functions similarly to Wormhole in that it supports Avalanche, Cosmos chains, Ethereum, most of the main ones. So Avalanche is like this bridge between these non-compatible worlds. But ultimately, Axelar is not a multi-sig. It's a full chain. It's a full blockchain. So it's proof of stake. And the people who are signing and attesting to these bridge transfers are the validators. So the validators have stake put up as collateral so that they don't do anything malicious with the money that they bridge over. So in that sense, Axelar is a little less trusted than Wormhole and many other multi-sigs, but it's still permissioned because the validator set is still a permissioned, limited, finite slot of validators.
Gotcha. Yeah, good to know. Yeah, it's good to know. And thanks for all this kind of education on all the variety of different architectures and systems. So what are you working on now today? What's on your plate, like on a day-to-day, or just what are you excited about?
Yeah. So right now there's two timelines that I'm working on. One is the immediate timeline, which is the immediate next 12 to 15 months from now, that's how long I project this bull market to last. In the immediate time frame, I work to help bootstrap the projects that I invest in, as well as I'm an advisor in Osmosis. So these projects I'm helping to find product market fit and basically make useful and adopted to a lot more people. And also there's this education piece, which is through my podcast called Entertain FM, where I basically teach people about this, but it's actually a podcast form, so it's actually similar to the format that you have right now. That's the educational piece that I use to distribute the knowledge to a wider audience. But yeah, and for the projects that I support, I also validate for them and I help them do various things to like from strategy to go to market and token economics, that kind of thing, comms to help people understand the project better and do like possibly raise capital for. It's like my day to day. But on
That's
the longer term timeline, I'm actually aligned with your vision with BitLaunch, which is I think that Web2 founders are going to start looking at crypto and seeing how to fit like solutions in a Web3 decentralized paradigm. And so identifying such early Web2 projects to basically build the next mainstream killer applications that's going to take 10 plus years to build and reach mass adoption for this technology also to scale to billions of users, that's going to take a much longer time. That's what I'm watching out for after the bull market's over.
Oh, that's great. So hey, I should get you on board. But Interchain FM is your educational podcast. Check that out if you guys aren't already checking that out. And yeah, any final words for builders or investors or enthusiasts in the space? Like after all your years of being in this space, any kind of few tips for people or words of advice? Just a few.
I would say that if you come in with and look at crypto as just a way to get rich, then treat it only as that. Meaning that if you get wrecked and lose your ass on speculating in crypto, don't blame it on the technology and say that the technology is going to fail and it's completely worthless because you treated it as that. But if you come in with the expectation of this technology, this infrastructure is the foundation for the next 250 years, and you look at it like that, then I think you're going to last a much longer time in the space and be a lot less disenfranchised if markets correct by more than 90% and you lose money on that. Right?
All right, that's a fantastic way to end this. I think that's that's really kind of words of wisdom and just will set people straight when they come into this from the get-go. Hey, you got two paths.
Yeah, exactly.
Here.
Yeah. As you get deeper into the crypto space, you'll see that there's two types of people in crypto. It's one who views it just purely as like a money game, or two, the people really who are building it because they care about it and see it for what it is, see the technology for what it could do.
Yeah, the true believers, I say. So thanks so much, Chjango. Yeah, I hope people check you out. Incredible. Wthanks for the education. And yeah, we'll hopefully have you back.
Thank you. Or I guess one last comment I would say, it's like,
Okay.
if you were living in 1980, in the 80s, and the internet was just starting to burgeon, but there was money and speculation attached to the internet development, would you see the internet for what it is or just purely as the money game? I'll end at that.
Okay, yeah, no, I think that's another good analogy of how what this space is all about. So really appreciate it. We'll have you back, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.
All right, thank you, June.
Take care.
Bye.